I am so very proud of my daughter, Allie. Our theme this month is about the SHero's journey, the hidden treasures along the way. Oh yes, and sometimes Thar Be Dragons. Allie has had an amazing SHero's journey, and one of the dragons that she faced was that of addiction. Now, I'm not giving away any of her anonymity because she's published a memoir, a recovery memoir of her recovery. And she just submitted her story to the AA Big Book because about every 2 decades, I guess, they rewrite it with stories in the back that are more contemporary. And we think she's on the short list because she's gotten a contract, and we think she's on the short list. Many years ago, when I read her recovery book, I learned things about her and my mothering that I had not known. My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, and I cried for several days. There's a Buddhist story about someone going to Kuan Yin and asking the Buddhist goddess of compassion and asking that she help them learn compassion. And she took them into the woods and she spread them heart up over a big boulder, and she took a stake and she crashed their heart into 1,000 pieces. When our heart breaks, that is how we learn compassion, beginning with ourselves. So reading Allie's memoir was my call to learn self-compassion. Here's a bit of family background. My maternal great-grandmother was abandoned by her husband. He was having an affair with a married lady, and her husband didn't like that and shot him dead in true Appalachian Mountain justice. So here she was in the 1870s, alone in a holler in the North Carolina mountains with 3 daughters under the age of 6. So she, in order to survive task orientation, not relationships, not hanging out and enjoying one another, not sharing feelings, but rather doing hard survival stuff, up at 4:30 in the morning, working hard all day became the priority. Her daughter, my grandmother, my mom's mom, came to her wedding with her hands bound because her fingers were frostbitten from carrying wood off the mountain that morning. So being tough and doing really scary things because we were told to, with no complaining or sharing about it, was part of our legacy. My mother carried that into our family. In elementary school, my brother and I walked across this long footbridge across a roiling river with lots of boulders. And we were little, so we would look down and through the cracks, and it could feel like you were going to fall through the cracks. We did it. You just did it. You did the scary things. In middle school and high school, I walked to school in the winter in the cold, even though it gave me severe asthma, and I would arrive at school feeling like I had this much space in my lungs to take in air. When I was 16 with a brand new driver's license, my mother had a friend who needed a pickup truck delivered to her son in a mountain town about an hour's drive away, windy mountain roads. She gave me a 5-minute instruction on how to drive a stick shift and sent me off. Can you imagine if I'd stalled that thing going up a winding mountain road and couldn't get the brakes on in time? It was scary, but we did it. You just did those things. My mother had her own SHero's journey. She was an accident, an unwanted child. Before her birth, the then youngest of her 4 older siblings, was doing what young boys in Appalachia did for entertainment on Sunday afternoons. They would jump the train in Bakersville, jump off in Spruce Pine, and take the train back to Bakersville. Well, my mother's brother got his cuff caught on the wheel jumping off the train and was pulled under and killed. So my deeply grieving, depressed grandmother, who was menopausal, thought she could have no more children, and my mother was conceived. She was cared for in a cursory way. Her mother had no energy to name her. She was called Sis, short for sister. And when she was 6 years old, she realized she would need a name for school, so she walked herself down to the courthouse in this small mountain town and gave herself a name, Bernita. I got some of my tenacity and perseverance and strength from my mother. Because she wasn't cared for well, she told stories of when she was a toddler, her older siblings would throw her in the creek and laugh as she struggled to breathe. And she also believed, so there was no supervision for her safety. She believed that her mission in life was to heal her parents' grief and help them to be happy. And of course, because she was a child, she couldn't do that. That was not her job. The lack of nourishing and lack of care for her safety brought her into motherhood with big shame and a lot of unconscious rage from her early life. That rage sometimes burst out of her in physically abusive ways to us. I became an extremely hardworking, overachiever, perfectionist to try to prove to her that I really was a good kid, and maybe she would see that and she would stop abusing us. There were lots of ways she and my father loved us, and all the ways they knew how. They started saving for our college education, 4 of us, from the day we were born. We had great food. That was a way my mother showed her love. And we had a good home, and they showed up for everything, no matter what. My mother helped make our majorette costumes and arranged for piano lessons. So there was a lot of good stuff there. And fun. Fun was compartmentalized. It wasn't part of everyday life, except we had good dinner table conversations. But on Friday and Saturday nights we had steak dinner, and then we had roasted peanuts and watched TV. That was our fun family night. As I've reviewed these ancestral stories, the thread that runs through it is that tough survival was a necessity, a priority in the beginning, and it was handed down. Even my mother brought it into our family when it was no longer necessary, but we do the things we've done. What was missing was a conscious awareness and expression of how precious we are to one another and that we were to one another. I came into motherhood with this maternal inheritance, quite unprepared for being the kind of mother I now wish I could have been. I carried unhealed shame from the physical abuse, certainly ignorance about hanging out and having fun and playing with and talking about feelings. We did have playful interactions, and we had compartmentalized fun time, and thank God the physical abuse stopped with me. I was teaching nursing full-time when Allie was about 1 year old. It was the early 70s, and it was hippiedom time. My then husband, Allie's father, was very taken with hippiedom. Try as I might, I couldn't follow him into the free sex revolution. He left for the San Francisco scene panhandling when Allie was not yet 1. So now I'm a full-time working single mother with no child support. I began graduate school to become a therapist, got myself into therapy to start healing myself as fast as I could. Let's heal this thing. What happened? Did I just push it too far? It's just rickety. Okay. It's demonstrating. It's My husband left, and there I was, a single mom, no child support. So I started graduate school, started working on healing myself in therapy as fast as I could, learning child development as fast as I could, and we started talking about our feelings. Those were the 70s, and it was the culture, and it was the culture in psychotherapy training of letting it all hang out. I did that, including too much with my little girl. When life felt too hard, I cried, and I cried about that in front of her. Then the women's movement came along, the feminist revolution. Friedan, Steinem, early leaders in that, were teaching that the best way to teach and show your daughter how to be a strong woman in the world was to do that yourself. Well, I set out to do that. I sure did know how to work hard, and I had a very demanding but good job that did require me to be strong and powerful. I was the first director of psych nursing at Durham Region. We helped to start that unit, and I also had a faculty position with Duke, helping to train the doctors who came to do their residency, teaching them therapy, group therapy, family therapy. And I called myself the chief second-class citizen in a patriarchal world. It was hard. So I did have to learn to be strong and assertive. With that backstory, here are some quotes and paraphrases from Allie's memoir in her recent article. Mom sometimes struggled too much, not hard enough, or she was afraid of contaminating me with her feelings of not being good enough, her fear she would turn into her mother. So one time when Allie was around 12, I asserted myself on her behalf. She had saved her allowance to buy this music alarm clock that a lot of the kids in her class had. After 10 days, it stopped working. So we went down to the JCPenney's in Durham, and I went up to customer service, and I told them this story, and I demanded that we get a new radio. And he says, goes to the back, he says, "I'm sorry, ma'am, we're all out of stock. There's nothing I can do for you." And I said, "Well, this is not fair. This is not right for my little girl, and I'm not leaving until we fix this somehow." "Well, ma'am, blah, 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 blah." I said, "I need to see your supervisor. I'm not leaving till I see your supervisor." I was causing a scene. There were about 20 people around us. Allie was so embarrassed. She's 20 feet away, hidden in an aisle. I'll tell you the end later. About these kinds of events, Allie writes in her memoir, "I sometimes felt embarrassed by her audacity, her unwillingness to fit into any mold, although there were none that would hold us, and her forthright charge to get what we needed by any means necessary. From the time she was 2 until about 12, I had that demanding full-time job. I worked long hours, getting home with little energy for her at the end of the day. So after about 10 years of that, she was in middle school, and she needed to be taken to activities after school, and I wanted more time, and I wanted not to arrive home exhausted. I wanted us to have some time, quality time in the evenings. In order to do this, I had an escape plan, but having very little child support, what I did was I worked my day job, now leaving at 5 instead of the usual 7. I would drive from Durham to Chapel Hill where we lived, get dinner, get Allie started on her homework, drive back to Durham, and do private practice 5 nights a week until about 9:30 at night, and I worked all day on Saturdays. Allie wrote in her article about those nights, her recent article, and I didn't know this, she said, "I spent nights alone in terror." I never knew that. Like me with my mother, you just did the hard things and you didn't talk about it. I learned that the bottom line when she was involved in her therapy is that she saw how hard my life was, so she made a decision to not bother me with the difficult things in her life. Learning that also broke my heart. This began my SHero's journey to find self-compassion. Of this journey, Joseph Campbell says, "Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. The very cave that you're afraid to enter turns out to be the source of what you're looking for." So to keep going requires self-compassion, where and when we have fallen, so that we can get up and continue. Because, we accept the call for the journey. La, 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 I'm off to an adventure. We get down the road, and there's initiations, a road of trials and ordeals. Some of those on our journey we fail, and we have to recover from these failures, rise again, pause, and continue. One of these trials can be a psychospiritual one, overcoming a lack of self-compassion. Well, what is self-compassion? It means moving away from self-blame and from not loving ourselves. Some parts of us can be so cruel, yes? You got those? They can be deadly. They can lead to physical or mental illness or addictions. And the cruel parts of me said things like, "How could you have been so stupid and ignorant and self-centered? What business do you have even being a therapist? You have nothing to give." It's like if we stay in that place and listen to those messages, it would be like the SHero in our journey falling into a pit and never climbing out. Remember Odysseus? He was going to pass this island with the sirens, and they're very alluring, like those voices can be with us. Yeah, you're right. I'll go live with you. And so what he did was he set his course, because these sirens would call and there were rocks that would crash the ships. He set his wheel to stay the course, and then he had his crew tie him to the mast so that he would not turn his ship to that island, no matter how tempting the sirens were. In self-compassion, we use our strength, our will, and our determination to ignore or release those cruel voices. We talk to a friend or a minister or a therapist. We have to be our own fierce friend in finding a way to release those cruel things. That is a part of us, but not a truth part of us. I mean, we want to keep going on this great adventure, right? Winston Churchill said, "Failure is not fatal. It is courage to continue that counts." So, we have to be compassionate so we can crawl out of that pit. Here are some tools, and they're on a handout in your bulletin. First, we notice when we're suffering. We don't do the stiff upper lift, I must move on thing. We notice when our heart is hurting. You don't need to read these, really. They're just to take home with you. Here's my favorite one. It's the "oh honey" approach, and I want you to try this with me. So I put my arms around myself, and I sway side to side, and I say either loudly or, outside or inside, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. I'm right here with you." Try that. Try it if you will. "Oh, honey. Oh, honey." How's it feel? Feel pretty good? Does it feel soothing? I love that one. I use it sometimes with friends and sometimes with my clients. Some parts of us, let's see. Okay, so I got Odysseus. Wait a minute, I'm lost. Okay. We have to release those inner critical voices, those dragons that sit on the treasure of our self-compassion. We can develop inner ideal parents that might say something to those voices, shame on you, shame on you. If I'd been her parent or significant person growing up, I would have never allowed you to say those things, and I'm right here and I'm going to tell that person what a good person they are. We can really develop that because we're all born with those archetypes inside. We can use affirmative prayer, releasing those voices and affirming our goodness. Self-compassion is reminding ourselves that our mistakes, our boo-boos, are all part of being human. We're not just divine. We're a divine person having a human experience. Dr. Kristen Neff, who studies self-compassion, says, the goal of self-compassion is to become a compassionate mess. All of our issues, entitlement, anger, self-worth, they'll all be there. Can we hold ourselves with compassion with all these things so that we're not overwhelmed with them? Can we say to ourselves, I love you just the way you are? And as we do that, we can also remember that we're also divine. Myrtle Fillmore says, we may get to a point in our lives where we think that our good is gone from us. Suffering, she says, is a means of drawing attention of our soul back to its beautiful temple. She says, should we be sweet and forgiving? Yes, but not without backbone. What does backbone mean? It means that when we accept our humanness and our divinity, we take an important next step. We get ourselves grounded, and with our backbone, we say no to people or situations that are pulling us away from our connection with Spirit. We ask ourselves, what is the gift in this painful experience? What is here for us to learn? If I made a boo-boo, what can I learn from this? And if we need to make an amend with ourselves, oh, honey, you didn't see that coming. Or, oh, honey, you had an intuition and you went ahead and do it anyway. I'm gonna trust my intuition better next time. Whatever. We make an amend with ourselves, or if we need to make an amend with another, we do that. So at this point, when we're struggling with whatever on our SHero's journey, often the SHero encounters a feminine being. From Unity's perspective, it could be the feminine energy of the Mother God. For Odysseus, it was the goddess Athena. It could be Kuan Yin or Sophia or Tara. We honor diversity. So one day, in the middle of this heartbreak, when I was finding out these things, I was out in the woods and doing some inner work, and I just fell on the ground and sobbed and sobbed. And I said to Grandmother Earth, that was my encounter with an aspect of the feminine, please forgive me. And do you know what I heard back after I finished crying? There's nothing to forgive. My sweet, there is nothing to forgive. We have to take that message, that love, into our hearts. Because guilt has no purpose. My deceased brother, Nat, he was so funny. He said, guilt is like beating ourselves about the head and shoulders with a dead chicken. Do you know what guilt really is? It is unprocessed grief. It is unprocessed anger. It is unprocessed sadness. I am so angry that I arrived into motherhood without the skills I needed. I am so sad for what Allie and I missed. And when we feel those feelings, they eventually clear out. Now, they get activated every now and then, but not so strong. Unity's co-founder, Charles Fillmore, and part of that is realizing after I'd done all that was that given what I had at the time, I did the very best I could. Unity founder Charles Fillmore speaks of reincarnation, as do many of the Eastern spiritual thoughts. And he says that we and others, that we come onto this earth relationally with a purpose to learn the things we need to learn in this life's classroom, to evolve our soul and evolve our spirit. So there's this reincarnation thing. So after I finished this sobbing, I went into the room. I was teaching a wilderness therapy group at the time, and I went back to my room. I'd told everybody to bring something from their altar that had meaning. So I grabbed something when I was quickly packing, just intuitively. I had no idea why I was grabbing it. So after this sob and hearing there is nothing to forgive, I go to my room and I pick up what I had brought, and guess what it is? It's Allie's recovery memoir. And if you can't see it, it has the back, Lena, if you can zoom in, if possible, it has the backside of an elephant. And the title is The Perfection of Everything. It was all perfect. We chose each other. We chose each other to come down. What if my mother and I had a soul contract to have our relationship as it was so that I could work to turn around that generational survival anxiety and overwork? What if Allie, my child, came to help me learn self-compassion and to love my weird, wonderful self just the way I am? Doing this work can literally change our DNA so that we do not pass this trauma and these bad habits down to future generations. And you know what's really wonderful? My self-compassion journey resulted in my feeling deep compassion and gratitude for my mother. What was our soul agreement? I'm part Cherokee in the spirit world, and one of my spirit animals is snake. I've worked a lot with that because it was hard. I've worked a lot with that. But in a book of Cherokee spirit animals, my friend Jay found for me, it says, if snake is your spirit animal, you have survived a childhood that many would not have, and you have grown up to be a healer. Well, for those of you who don't know, I'm a psychotherapist, and I feel like I'm a pretty good healer. So in this SHero's journey, after surviving the initiations and finding the treasures, and we've developed our strength and our power and our will and our compassion, the SHero returns home. Joseph Campbell says that we're now masters of two worlds, the human and the divine. We can enjoy a fulfilled and balanced life. And remember the story of Job? He went through a hero's journey. He was pretty righteous and pretty wealthy, and for some unknown reason, God afflicts him with all these afflictions. Some say he had a bet with the devil or Lucifer challenged him. I don't know. But anyway, he held the course. And his friends, metaphysically, those critical voices came and said, look what's happened to you. You're a sinner. You're not as righteous as we thought you were. You've really done something wrong. But he held the course, and he stayed. And guess what he says about going through the end, coming home at the end of that journey? God will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. And we also come home from our journeys with wisdom and the gifts that we gained that we can share with others. Here is Allie's SHero journey wisdom from the end of the paper that she just wrote. With this guidance in my life, I went back to school to become a hospice nurse. I help people and their loved ones at the end of their lives during some of their most difficult times. I get to do this today. There is no way to express what the hands that helped me along the way meant to me. So I will continue to reach mine out, guided by my higher power, to those around me. I find pleasure in being there for those in need, spending hours supporting my patients and other women in recovery. Being helpful is my only aim. So I did some things right. The aftermath of that radio story is that the supervisor finally came down. This whole thing, I may have waited there for 20 minutes. I don't know. He finally came down and he listened to the story. I said, it's just not fair. I just can't let this happen to my little girl. And he goes back to the back. I said, just a minute. He goes back to the back and he comes back and he said, we don't have the model that your daughter bought, but we've got the next grade up. Would it be okay if I gave you that? I turned to Allie, who's peeking out around the aisle where she's hidden, and I looked at her and she said, So Allie says in her book, in response to that, I am aghast. No way. Suddenly, I feel like we belong in the world. I grab her hand and we walk victoriously through the door. I learned, she says, that life will be hard, there will be chaos, unfairness, and difficulty, but this is a strong woman. I can learn from her. Joe Biden says that you know that you've done a good job or a good enough job parenting when your adult children turn out to be better human beings than you are. So I know I did a very good job because Allie is one of the wisest, goodest people I know, and her life inspires me every day. And my heroine's journey, well, it is my joy and honor to be here sharing whatever wisdom from my journey may be helpful to my beloved community, fellow journeyers, and fellow homecomers. I hope it's helpful to you.